Okay, so before we move on to our feature tests, let's have a look at Pest's higher order expectations. Now, we've already come across higher order tests where we can do something like this. It does something, and we can just chain on things like posting through and then going ahead and asserting that things were okay. That's a great way to write tests, but we can do the same thing without expectations. Let's have a look at how this works by just coming up to a test like this and see what we can do to make this a little bit clearer. Traditionally within PHP Unit or Laravel's testing framework, we would have to do these separately. So we'd have to expect the accepted friends of mine to have a count of 1, and the same for this as well. We'd have to pluck this out and then check that it contains that friend. Let's rewrite this to use a higher order expectation. So we're going to go ahead and still use expect. We're going to pass in the thing that we're checking, but remember we're doing multiple checks or multiple expectations and assertions on this. So we're going to say to have count 1. That's pretty much exactly what we wrote here. So there's no difference here. The only difference is I've pulled this down to a new line. But now what we're going to do is say pluck ID, and then we're going to say to contain friend ID. So we could pull that up a little bit just because it makes a little bit more sense to have this in line, because this plucking relates to this particular to contain expectation. But that's pretty much what we can do. We can now get rid of these two things here, and that tends to read a little bit better. Let's just rerun our test, and sure enough, this still passes and this is completely valid. Now, if we just scroll down, we don't really have anything that uses the same thing. Technically, we have to have the same thing pass into expect. So if, for example, we were doing something else on user friends, we could just pass that in. For now, though, we don't have anything that uses the same data that we want to run these expectations on. That's absolutely fine, but we could do, for example, to be instance of collection if we wanted to. So let's go ahead and make sure we pull the Laravel collection in, and there we go. That works if you wanted to do something like that. But basically with higher order expectations, we can just continue to chain on what we want to do instead of having to redefine expect every single time. I'll leave this in here just for reference in the downloadable source code, but hopefully that makes sense now. So when you are writing things like this, just chain them on, much like we saw with higher order tests.